Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Leeson here at today's top stories. Former Prime Minister David Cameron says his controversial lobbying of the government was not motivated by his investment in Greensill capital. New cases of the Indian variant doubled in a week, and the government is considering bringing forward the date for a second dose of vaccine. And Labour has suspended a trade union leader over his comment on Home Secretary Patel. Former Prime Minister David Cameron says he had a big economic investment in Greensill capital, but denies it motivated his intense lobbying of the government last year. Cameron gave evidence to MPs yesterday.
This is a painful day, coming back to a place that I love and respect so much, albeit virtually, but in these circumstances. And I've had plenty of time to reflect on what has happened. I welcome this inquiry and its related reviews, and I believe there are important lessons to be learned.
Former Prime Minister David Cameron testified during a parliamentary inquiry into Greensill capital. He served as a lobbyist to the now-collapsed financial firm, though he said on Thursday that wasn't the role he was hired for. Cameron repeatedly contacted senior ministers and officials over a 4-month period in 2020. In total, he made over 50 contacts via text, email, WhatsApp and phone calls. The ministers contacted include Finance Minister Rishi Sunak, Cabinet Office Minister Michael Gove and Health Minister Matt Hancock. He lobbied the government to give Greensill access to a COVID-19 financing scheme.
I completely accept that former Prime Ministers are in a different position to others because of the office that we held and the influence that continues to bring. We need to think differently and act differently. Lobbying itself is a necessary and healthy part of our democratic process, but I accept there's a strong argument that having a former Prime Minister engage on behalf of any commercial interest, no matter how laudable the motives and cause, can be open to misinterpretation.
Cameron declined to say exactly how much he was paid by Greensill or how much he would have made from shares he owned if the business had prospered.
I was paid an annual amount, a generous annual amount, far more than what I earned as Prime Minister. And I had shares, not share options, but shares in the business, which vested over the period of time of my contract. And so it's important for the committee to know that I, was absolutely had a big economic investment in the future of Greensill. I wanted the business to succeed. I wanted it to grow.
He said his investment didn't motivate his lobbying, but he believed Greensill could help the country at a time of crisis. Cameron said that when he contacted ministers, he had no sense that Greensill was in financial difficulty. Cameron began working as an advisor for Greensill in 2018, just over 2 years after he resigned as Prime Minister. An independent probe on behalf of the Prime Minister will look into Greensill and Cameron's role. Labour said the review will not be enough.
The government's roadmap out of lockdown is under pressure. Figures show cases of the Indian variant to have more than doubled in a week. NTD's Neil Woodrow has the details.
Latest data from Public Health England shows a rise in cases of the so-called Indian variant this week in the UK from 520 to 1,313. The agency says cases are rising in the community and it was assessing the impact and severity of the variant. In response, the government is considering to bring forward the date for a second dose of vaccine for eligible groups. Health Secretary Matt Hancock says the government is monitoring the situation carefully and will not hesitate to take further action if necessary. The scheduled progress of the roadmap out of lockdown relies upon 4 tests being met. One of them says that variants are not changing the assessment of the risks. Vaccines Minister Nadhim Zahawi said on LBC on Friday that everybody should do their bit by taking 2 tests a week, doing PCR tests in the affected areas and to isolate. Bolton has one of the highest case rates of the variant in the country. Authorities there offered door-to-door PCR testing to 22,000 residents. The government says there is no firm evidence yet to show this variant has any greater impact on severity of disease or evades the vaccines, but the speed of growth is concerning. To help identify variant cases, authorities deploy surge testing in 15 areas across England. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has not ruled out local lockdowns to contain the spread of the virus. Local lockdowns are only expected to be used if evidence suggests they are necessary to contain or suppress a variant which escapes the vaccines. Neil Woodrow, NTD News, Westminster, London.
The Labour Party have suspended a trade union leader after he suggested Home Secretary Priti Patel was disgusting and should be deported. The tweet read, "Priti Patel should be deported, not refugees." Howard Beckett later deleted his tweet and apologised for the comments. He sat on Labour's ruling National Executive Committee. He was also standing for the leadership of Unite, one of the most powerful unions in the country. Beckett made the remarks following protests in Glasgow over the detention of 2 Indian men by Border Force officials. Around 200 demonstrators surrounded the immigration enforcement van for about 7 hours, blocking its path. The Home Office said in a statement that the men were detained in relation to suspected immigration offences and had been released on bail. Home Secretary Priti Patel plans tougher laws to counter foreign interference and economic espionage. Under the plans, spreading disinformation on behalf of hostile states like China and Russia would become a crime. Here's NTD's Jane Worrell with more.
New proposals from Home Secretary Priti Patel mean foreign academics suspected to help hostile states like China and Russia could have restrictions imposed on their movement. It applies to suspected foreign agents even when police don't have enough evidence to prosecute them. The government consultation document says it's a last resort. In the proposal, Priti Patel says an order to impose the restrictions could bypass the courts. The changes come amid fears that Chinese agents are stealing intellectual property from British universities and concerns over activities of Russian spies following a nerve agent attack in Salisbury. The government says the changes would strengthen existing anti-espionage laws. It also means people could be criminalised for spreading disinformation on behalf of hostile states. It's part of a package of measures that will create a US-style register of foreign agents. Jane Worrell, NTD News, London.
Ireland's health service has been forced to shut down its IT systems after it was hit by a significant ransomware attack overnight. The Republic's health service said all of its national and local systems were affected. As a result, it temporarily shut down its systems as a precaution. Police and military cybersecurity teams are supporting the health service. The cyber attack affected many services, including GP and COVID-19 test referrals. But they say the vaccination program has not been affected and are urging people to attend appointments as normal. And in other news, thousands of supermarkets and shops around the country are committed to continue accepting cash. That's after 1/3 of people said their coins and notes were rejected last year.
Major retailers and high street shops promise to continue to accept cash. Aldi, Asda, Co-op, John Lewis, Lloyd's Pharmacy, Waitrose and thousands of other shops around the country have signed up to a cash-friendly pledge. The supermarkets represent about 1/3 of all grocery stores in the UK. Consumer group Which organised the pledge. Which's chief executive said the goal is to reassure consumers who rely on cash that they won't be left behind as we make the transition to digital payments. Leading retail associations like the British Retail Consortium are encouraging their members to sign up. The Bank of England is also in support of the initiative. The pandemic accelerated a shift toward cashless payment systems as people shopped more from home or used card payments in stores. Additionally, concerns about cash not being safe to handle led to a huge drop in cash usage. A survey by Which found that about 1/3 of shoppers have been rejected at least once when trying to pay with cash since March last year. Which says 10 million consumers are not ready or able to give up cash at present. The group is calling upon the government to follow up on its promise to draft legislation that will protect cash usage.
Channel 4 could be privatised in less than 3 years. That's what Culture Secretary Oliver Dowden told MPs on Thursday. He says the privatisation of Channel 4 will be considered during a government review of public service broadcasting, and that during Parliament's next session, the future operating model for Channel 4 would be considered in legislation. Channel 4 was launched in 1982 as a publicly owned public service broadcaster, funded by its own commercial activity. In late February, a fireball lit up skies over the UK when a rare meteorite crashed onto a Gloucestershire driveway. And soon you can see it in a famous London museum.
A rare 4.5 billion-year-old meteorite that crashed to Earth earlier this year is set to star at London's Natural History Museum when the attraction reopens. It's thought to be the first meteorite recovered in the UK for 30 years, and it's also the first meteorite of its particular type. Not only is the nearly 300 grams of meteorite very old, scientists say it's incredibly rare and it contains organics and amino acids, the key ingredients for life.
Water in our solar system is something we're really interested in, so this meteorite might answer some of those questions about where the water was, where it came from.
On February 28th, a fireball lit up the skies over the UK and Northern Europe. It was a meteorite. Its fragments were eventually found in a driveway in the small Cotswold town of Winchcombe. Other pieces were later recovered from the local area. Scientists from the Natural History Museum were some of the first on the scene.
When they first saw it, they described it as looking a little bit like a piece of coal that somebody, or a piece of charcoal that somebody had thrown and it had exploded.
For the Wilcock family of Winchcombe, Gloucestershire, the meteorite was not only a priceless find but also a rude awakening. 25-year-old Hannah says fragments of the rock smashing on their driveway sounded like glass shattering.
It was peak lockdown, so to speak, so I wasn't really doing anything that evening, funnily enough, and I heard something shatter outside.
Hannah's parents have worked in education, so donating their extraordinary find to a museum was a natural thing to do.
And we're just so lucky that we've got our little part in inspiring people through this meteorite, and we want it to be on show so that people can see it and be thrilled.
London's Natural History Museum will reopen its doors on May 17th, after 5 months of closure due to pandemic restrictions. The popular visitor attraction usually welcomes over 5 million visitors annually, but they saw only around 200,000 last year.
World-famous British chef Claire Smith sold out 3 months of bookings in 20 minutes when her restaurant said it would reopen. It underscores her faith that London is ready to rebound.
At Core Restaurant in London's trendy Notting Hill, 3 Michelin-starred chef Claire Smith and her team are preparing to reopen their doors on Monday.
It's been a long time, this one. I'm super excited, can't wait to get the guests through the door. It's going to be quite emotional, and I mean, the whole team is absolutely pumping and on fire.
And they're going to need that enthusiasm. Smith sold out 3 months of bookings in 20 minutes when her restaurant said it would emerge from lockdown. The 42-year-old won the highest accolade in fine dining in January when all restaurants were shut. During the health crisis, she trained her staff online for hours a day, cooked through charities for 600 people a week, and created a tasting menu for customers to be sent out in London. That helped to retain all her staff and keep suppliers in business, but it was a challenge.
We were all so shocked. We didn't know what would happen, didn't know what the future held, and I didn't even know if restaurants were going to exist again.
While excitement about reopening next week is tangible, Smith worries that the broader industry is yet to feel the full force of the global health crisis. Costs have jumped, rent arrears have ballooned, and skilled European staff have left the country. Trade group UK Hospitality has estimated that in the year after the first lockdown in March 2020, 1 in 5 restaurants shut. Those still standing have to establish how they will pay back rent and government loans. But for now, it's all about getting ready to welcome diners back for the first time this year.
I think people appreciate it more than ever, going out and just having that experience. I think cooking at home is one thing, and having delivery boxes is another, but going somewhere with an atmosphere and having people serve and cook for you is a completely different thing.
Still to come, Italy finds Google for excluding an e-mobility app from its Android system. Find out more after the break.